Austin Simmons is surrounded by Manning talk right now, but T. Martin might be the goal.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is the Locked On Ole Miss Podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast out there. I'm your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media and a former Ole Miss staff member. Today, we're diving into the Austin Simmons hype, something we haven't seen for an Ole Miss quarterback since Eli Manning. Could this young quarterback lead Ole Miss to something we haven't seen happen in almost 30 years? I'll explain that. And with Jackson Dart moving on, Simmons could be the next big thing, and it has Ole Miss fans talking right now. We also talk about Landon Duckworth's upcoming visit and why Ole Miss fans should keep an eye on this rising talent quarterback. Plus, the price gouging of Ole Miss fans, it just really needs to stop. If not, it could ruin something that is really special in Oxford, Mississippi. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special shout out to our insiders and everydayers who make this show what it is. For the second listen, check out Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC or Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy for other perspectives on college football, the SEC, and yes, even Ole Miss. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Now, it's really interesting stuff because right now the hype levels that Austin Simmons is receiving is something that Ole Miss fans have not seen in a very long time, likely since Eli Manning. And we're talking about a school that realistically lately has had pretty good quarterbacks come through the system. I mean, before Austin Simmons was Jackson Dart, but the hype level wasn't quite there because of a spring game that was a little bit off and a little bit weird. So the hype wasn't exactly to this level. Before them was Matt Corral, which everybody was kind of hyped up about Matt Corral, but it wasn't quite to this level. Jordan Ta'amu beat out Shea Patterson. There was a ton of hype for Shea Patterson, but the next year wasn't really good. Now, if it happened right after his Texas A&M comeback victory, yes, the hype would have been off the charts. But after that was a loss to Vanderbilt and a blowout to Mississippi State, which kind of tempered expectations going into the next year. JUCO players and Chad Kelly and Bo Wallace that didn't really have hype that came with them a little bit, but not much. You go back to the Hugh Freeze quarterbacks there, and before them was like Barry Brunetti and Zach Stout and those guys. Jevin Sneed, I did have like a creepy guy from Rivals following me around Walmart trying to get information on Jevin Sneed, but the hype level wasn't quite there because Ole Miss's football team was so bad during the Ed Orgeron years. So it takes us back to Eli Manning, and that was the last time that I saw the Ole Miss fan base just kind of giggling with anticipation of what was going on. And Eli, his redshirt freshman year, the anticipation, this is the year that Ole Miss was anticipating Eli. He went 16 to 33, 170 yards and an interception. That was his numbers that year. Now, if you look at Austin Simmons, 19 to 32, 282 yards and 2 touchdowns. Not bad for redshirt freshman and redshirt freshman. And yes, I do understand that it's 2 completely different eras in football. But that is one Manning that Austin Simmons is having to deal with being compared to because of the hype level that is on Eli Manning at the moment and Austin Simmons. The other is the name that's on the tip of everybody's tongue this season is Arch Manning, the quarterback at Texas, who's going to be the starter. Ole Miss does not play Texas. They would have to meet in the SEC championship game for that to happen. But Arch Manning is the betting favorite, him and Garrett Nussmeier, to win the Heisman Trophy. And Arch Manning has never started a football game. Well, he has started a football game. He's never been the starter on the team. I think he played against Mississippi State and Louisiana Monroe. He started those games. But when you look at that, and Austin Simmons inevitably being compared with Arch Manning, playing football to where he's studying film every single day in the Manning Center, you can see how that is going to be a discussion point for pretty much the next 2 years of them being in school. And the third Manning, and this is the weird one that everybody might see, is Peyton Manning. And that is because Austin Simmons is replacing Jackson Dart, who is the owner of nearly every record in the Ole Miss record book at the moment. Peyton Manning broke all the records at Tennessee and was a superstar himself. So the Peyton Manning to T. Martin comparison is kind of the same thing as the Jackson Dart to Austin Simmons comparison. Now the question becomes then, can Austin Simmons lead Ole Miss to levels similar to what T. Martin did in 1998? I do not know. This kind of different teams. But if you want to look at the hype going into that season from T. Martin, this is what he did as his redshirt freshman or redshirt sophomore. He's 4'6", 12 yards, a touchdown, and a pick for the Tennessee Volunteers. So you can see how leading up and the hype is like a little bit hit and miss and all of that. But I do know that Austin Simmons' goal is to win the national title. He said that after the Ohio State game immediately on Instagram. And I do know that he has numbers better than every quarterback that we've brought up. He is somebody that is going to have a great career, it looks like, if you just look at these comparisons that we are making. Now, it was a different era of football. The offense that David Cutcliffe ran at Tennessee and at Ole Miss, that is different than what Lane Kiffin is doing now. But the completion percentage is up. The yards per attempt is up. The touchdowns are up. All of these things are good when you're talking about Hall of Fame level quarterbacks in Peyton Manning and Eli Manning. If you're looking at that. So we'll see exactly how it goes. Now, if Ole Miss needs to make a run towards that national title, towards that T. Martin goal that I talked about just a second ago, whenever you have a very much a stud quarterback leave, everybody assumes there's going to be a step back. So you have a chance to get on a little bit of roll. And that's what happened to the 98 Tennessee Volunteers. Now, Tennessee had a really good defense that year. I think John Chavis, that was one of his better units. And Ole Miss is going to probably take a step back defensively this year because there is no Walter Nolan, there is no Princely and Monmielen. But you do have Suntaran Perkins. You do have Prince Will Monmielen. You have Jam Brown, who's a freshman All-American. You have Xavion Harris. You have Cam Franklin. You have Deshaun Womack. You have pieces on this defense, and the linebacker room has a chance to be really good. The question mark for the defense is going to end up in the secondary. Ole Miss has to hit on some of their evaluations in the secondary. If Ole Miss can do that, if Ole Miss can hit on those evaluations and the defense is what we think they can be, and they're going to be really good in the front seven. But if they can match that on the back end of the defense a little bit, you have a chance for Austin Simmons to kind of cook a little bit on offense. And running back, that 98 Tennessee team had Jamal Lewis, Travis Stevens, and Travis Henry, 3 NFL running backs, essentially. This Ole Miss running back room is not quite there. But for what Ole Miss does offensively, you can make it work with the pieces that are there. Whenever you have those guys playing running back and you can count on them to get a yard when you need a yard, because this year, if you would have done that, you would have been 12-0, and this year would have been that year. But next season, 2025, these are the things that are important for Ole Miss football. Ole Miss is missing out, it looks like, on Pat Coogan, the interior offensive lineman from Notre Dame. I think he, at the last moment, canceled his visit yesterday morning. So you're looking at the interior offensive line of Delano Townsend, Patrick Kutas, and then Bryson Sanders. We all thought that Bryson Sanders needed to be ready to play, but that's going to be a big piece for Ole Miss, and especially snapping the football and what could happen. I've heard rumors through the grapevine that Ole Miss is going to tweak their offense a little bit next year, go a little bit more pro style, try and figure out a way to deal with all of the technology upgrades that people have. I think Ole Miss found out last season that they just couldn't surprise people. And so much of Ole Miss's offense was based off of tempo and catching people in busts because college players bust. Well, that went down a good bit whenever helmet communication was there and you could just bark out instant signals to the other team. So what I think might happen is you might not substitute and you might get lined up, but that clock may go down to 15 seconds. They do a quick shift, something like that, and all of a sudden that becomes the new tempo of going from 15 seconds on the play clock down to 10 seconds as opposed to snapping it as quickly as possible. You'll see teams line up a certain way. And Ole Miss, I think you can see with the tight ends that they brought in and the wide receivers, they have it set up to where they can go in between 12 and 13 personnel and 11 personnel without changing personnel groupings really. But formationally, you can do the 11 personnel stuff. You can do the 12 personnel stuff. You can even do the 13 personnel stuff with what they have on the roster. And I think that is very important. Austin Simmons has all of these toys at his disposal, every single one of them. And this could be a season that he tries to emulate what T. Martin did after following a legend like Peyton Manning. He's extremely hyped. The last time we saw a quarterback this hyped was Eli Manning, and he's going to be in the conversation with Arch Manning over the course of this whole season. The word Manning and him working out and becoming the quarterback that he needs to be in the Manning Center, Manning is going to be center stage in his world this year. So we'll see if he's able to pull it off and what he can exactly do for Ole Miss. You know, a top 120 quarterback from Alabama is set to visit Ole Miss for Junior Day. Who is Landon Duckworth, and what could he bring to the Rebels? We'll introduce you to him next. You know, attending NFL playoff games is an experience like no other. The energy, the excitement, the camaraderie with other fans, it's absolutely unmatched. I'll never forget the thrill of watching my favorite team clinch a playoff victory live. It's kind of a moment that I'll cherish forever. This year, Game Time makes it even easier to create those unforgettable memories with their new feature, Game Time Picks. It cuts through the clutter and shows you only the best deals on great seats so you can focus on what really matters, and that is being there. I recently used Game Time Picks to snag tickets for upcoming playoff games, and it was such a breeze. I found a super deal that gave me an amazing value for incredible seats. One of my favorite features was being able to preview the seat view before buying. It's so helpful. Plus, with their all-in prices, there's not a surprise fee at checkout. And the Game Time guarantee gave me peace of mind knowing my tickets were secure and they were going to be delivered on time. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So Ole Miss is getting ready to host their Junior Day over the weekend, and I'm certain there's going to be a ton of big names in attendance if you just look at all the people that Lane Kiffin and his staff have been visiting over the last couple of days. When you see those names, when Zach Berry or Billy Amati or all those guys start putting out names of where Lane Kiffin has been, the reason Ole Miss is doing that is trying to secure a Junior Day. They're trying to get them to the campus. Ole Miss, been to Picayune and all over South Mississippi. Anybody that's anybody really right now is getting a visit from Lane Kiffin and the staff, including like even outside the state in Georgia and Florida, where Lane Kiffin has made the rounds. Like Deuce Gerald's, I think they went to see him 2 or 3 times. It seems like every time you look up, there's a picture of a visit between a staff member and Deuce Gerald's. But that leads me to Landon Duckworth. We talked yesterday about Deshaun Henderson, a quarterback out of Houston, Texas. But let's talk about Landon Duckworth today. Listen, he is a quarterback out of Alabama, and he's expected to be at Junior Day. According to Billy Embody, he says Ole Miss will host the 2026 quarterback. And when you look at the composite of what's going on, he's from Jackson High School in Alabama. On 3 services, has him as a 3-star and the number 27 quarterback in the country. But after that, it changes considerably. 247 has him as a 4-star and the 5th quarterback in the country. ESPN has him as the top quarterback in the country, period. And Rivals has him as the number 3 quarterback. He's listed as the number 8 player in Alabama, according to the composite, the number 11 quarterback overall, according to the composite, and the national 131 player. Good football player. I like Landon Duckworth. And when you look at his highlights, the first thing you notice is he's just an explosive athlete. He's another one real similar to what we saw in Kayshawn Henderson, and is somebody that is kind of letting you know what's in Lane Kiffin's head currently as far as the quarterbacks that he's recruiting. And it's nothing against the statuesque quarterbacks, but those guys just don't exist. You would not see Dan Marino playing quarterback in modern football. You would not see that. I mean, Mike Leach 10 years ago had a statement as like a dual threat quarterback is a quarterback that can't pass. That was a Mike Leach quote, rest in peace. That doesn't exist anymore. You almost have to have a dual threat quarterback. When you look at all the stuff that Jackson Dart could do and what he did with his legs over the course of 3 years, that lets you know of the weapon of having a quarterback as a design runner could be. Listen, Austin Simmons can throw the ball and run the ball as well. He's a 4-5 level quarterback. He's somebody that can run. He just chooses not to. He uses his leg to throw the passes. So we'll see exactly how that goes. But when you look at Landon Duckworth, he's got the athleticism to make absolutely freakish plays as a running quarterback. But also whenever he throws the ball, it looks like a top shelf quarterback. It looks like he belongs. It looks like one of those quarterback positions should be, and the way it should look. Him throwing the football down the field. And this is at Jackson High School in Alabama. And, you know, looking at what he does, he's 6'3", 190 pounds, just like Kayshawn Henderson. He's another one that I could see in 3 years being 6'3", 6'4", 220 pounds, and can still run like a deer. I mean, that's just the way it is with Landon Duckworth. A really good quarterback, and we'll monitor what's going on. I'm almost certain that somebody will pull the trigger this weekend because it seems like it happens every year. I've heard nothing, but it just feels like something usually breaks after Junior Day. So we'll see exactly how that goes for Ole Miss as well. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, when we come back, Ole Miss is handling the rev share situation the exact wrong way. But what does that mean for the program's future? In our final segment, we break it all down and explore the potential impact. Stay tuned. Ole Miss did something that they shouldn't have done, in my opinion, at all. The Grove is the goose that laid the golden egg in Ole Miss athletics. It allows you to have decent attendance when Ole Miss is taking on Georgia State or Middle Tennessee. You're always going to have at least a decent atmosphere because of the Grove. It's untouchable, in my opinion. It is the reason that Ole Miss doesn't necessarily have to worry about the attendance decline that other schools have to go through, because the Grove is such an event-driven place, and people just enjoy doing that, the socializing and all of that stuff that happens before a game. It's the goose that laid the golden egg. It is the most important part right now in the Ole Miss athletic department because it ensures football attendance. People want to go up there. The football game sometimes is secondary compared to tailgating in the Grove. And if you don't believe me, go back and look at all the conversations that people had on message boards about how the Grove is ruining Ole Miss football games because people tailgating in it. The tailgating in the Grove is a major, major deal. In my opinion, it is untouchable. So when I say that I think Ole Miss did the exact wrong thing to handle their rev share situation, that is where I'm coming from. And Ole Miss is going to work out a system to where they're basically taxing vendors. Of course, those costs is going to be given to customers, and all of a sudden you're going to have less people tailgating in the Grove. And that should be worrisome for Keith Carter. Everybody looked at the attendance number that Ole Miss had last season, where they were having 66, 67,000 people in the stadium every single game. And that year was the exception, not the norm. I've been in that stadium many times to where it was 40,000, 45,000 people in there at all. And that's with the Grove. Now, let's remove people from the Grove to where that becomes less of an event. You have people getting charged to tailgate, however much it is over the course of the season, but it's not cheap. Parking at Ole Miss has gone up 200 or 300% in some cases. That's a big deal. You know there's going to be some sort of a price on tickets as Ole Miss tries to recoup the money that they're giving up in rev share, the $20 million a year. And make no mistake, you're going to hear people talk about all the time, Ole Miss had to do this because if they didn't do this, you would miss out on the players and all of that. That's not true. It's not even a little bit true because the first line item, the money that is going to be taken out from the TV money is rev share. So that money is already there, already accounted for. It is from the TV dollars. This money is about recouping what those $20 million would normally be going to. And when I worked at Ole Miss, which it was probably 20 years ago at this point, and with what was going on, there was waste back then. And it wasn't on a shoestring budget, but it was on a very small budget. It was one of those situations to where I had to report to Pete Boone how many tapes I was buying and what they were being used for. You know, I had to write it all out and all of that stuff. There were inefficiencies absolutely everywhere and very strict things in other places. I'm not saying that Ole Miss just needs to drop $20 million in their budget, but their budget this past year was $144 million or something like that. It was some large amount of money. The budget in 2006 was about $35 million. So it's almost gone up $100 million. So when you look at what that $20 million, where that puts you through, I think that Ole Miss would have been fine regardless. But what this is to me, in my opinion, is you want to keep the athletic budget and the athletic department exactly how it was. Texas A&M had something maybe right whenever they just laid off 60 people in their athletic department. I guess it was last February, whenever Trev Alberts got in there. They laid all those people off. They trimmed the fat. And the athletic department has allowed Ole Miss's athletic department to kind of become a governmental industry to the point where they are taxing people to make enough money for what they want to do, as opposed to getting enough money to do what's needed. So we'll see. Right now, whenever I worked at Ole Miss 20 years ago, every head coach had secretaries, and some coaches had multiple secretaries working in the building. And I'm sure they do something. I know they do stuff, and they're pretty good at their job. But whenever you're talking about passing along costs to the customers who is already being asked to do absolute everything financially around college sports at Ole Miss, this is just another thing. Whenever you should have done the PR move to at least say that, hey, we're working on this ourselves and we're going to try and meet you in the middle. That is the problem that I think people have, is the fact that the other stuff to where the athletic department cutting spending, we don't know anything about that. All we know is that everything we know, we're paying $7.50 for a hot dog or something like that. Absolutely ridiculous stuff. So I just do think that the charging for the Grove, that's kind of shooting the goose that laid the golden egg, and Ole Miss needs to stay away from that, because all of a sudden those attendances could drop down to 50,000 per game pretty quickly if all of a sudden people aren't incentivized to come up to the Grove and tailgate. That's just my opinion on that. So thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the number one Ole Miss podcast out there. Thank you very much. Your support means the world to us. And thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen day. For your second listen, check out Locked On SEC podcast. Host Chris Gordy holds no punches, covering the best conference in college football. Find Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Hotty toddy, everyone. And remember, analytics is just the old English word meaning bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.